Here is part 1 written in simple. Natural English, around 1700 words. Human-centric, safe for YouTube. And without restricted names, the day began like any other for the young woman who always woke up before the sun. Her room was small, barely big enough for a bed, a wooden chair, and an old table that wobbled whenever she wrote on it. But she never complained. She had lived most of her life learning how to accept what she had, even when it was little. She put on the same shirt she wore to most of her part-time jobs, tied her hair back, and stepped quietly into the kitchen so she wouldn't wake her mother. Her mother slept on the sofa since it was easier for her back. She had been sick for months, and medicine was getting more expensive. Every day the young woman felt the pressure growing on her shoulders. She needed more money, but she only had 2 hands and 24 hours in a day. And she felt like she was using every one of those hours already. She poured warm water into a cup and set it on the table for her mother for when she woke. Then she stepped outside into the cool morning air. The street was quiet as people slowly began their day. Some opened shops, some swept their front doors, some hurried to catch buses. She walked fast, clutching her old bag as if it held her whole world inside. Inside the bag was something she rarely talked about, a thin notebook where she had written simple piano notes she remembered from her childhood. Her father used to save money just so she could take lessons for a short time. Those lessons ended quickly when life became difficult, but the memory of playing stayed with her. She never became an expert, but she could play enough to enjoy the feeling of music. She just didn't think it would ever help her earn anything. But that day would change everything. She reached the job board near the bus stop. It was a faded wooden board, covered in flyers, ads, and handwritten notes. Most of them were old, half torn by rain and wind. She didn't expect to find anything new. Still, checking the board had become a habit, even if nothing came from it. She scanned the papers with tired eyes. There were the usual offers: cleaning, delivery, dishwashing. She had tried most of those already. Then she noticed a fresh paper pinned neatly, not crooked like the others. The paper was clean, printed, and looked official. She stepped closer and read it, looking for a patient and calm tutor for piano lessons. Student is visually impaired. Experience preferred, but not required. Must be gentle and encouraging. Good pay. She read it twice. She looked around, wondering who would put such a job on a simple street board. At the bottom of the flyer was the company name, a major corporation she had only heard about in the news. People talked about how its CEO was powerful, strict, and impossible to approach. She had never imagined someone like that would advertise a job like this in a public place. She hesitated. Her mind began listing reasons to walk away. She had no official training. She had no certificates. She only knew what her father had taught her, and that was years ago. What if they laughed at her? What if they refused to even speak to her? But then she thought of her mother's medicine, and the rent, and the feeling she got whenever she touched piano keys, even if it was just her imagination. She took out her phone and dialed the number at the bottom. A calm voice answered. She introduced herself softly, half expecting them to cut the call. Instead, the person asked her a few simple questions, nothing alarming. Just her name, her schedule, and whether she felt comfortable working with a child who could not see. She answered honestly. She wasn't trained, but she was patient. And she knew how it felt to struggle. She knew how it felt when people judged you before giving you a chance. The voice on the phone paused, then said something that shocked her. Can you come for a trial lesson today? Her heart jumped. Today? She looked down at her clothes, simple, plain, nothing special. Yes, she said quietly. I can come. The voice gave her an address, and her breath caught in her throat the moment she heard it. She had seen that address in magazines. It was the location of one of the largest mansions in the city. She ended the call and stood still for a moment, clutching the phone with shaking hands. Then she hurried back home to change. She didn't have fancy clothes, but she found the cleanest shirt she owned. Before leaving again, she looked at her mother, who was still asleep. She whispered, "Please let this work." The journey to the mansion felt long. When she finally reached the tall gates, her legs felt weak. A security guard approached her, looking unsure of what she was doing there. She explained she was there for the trial lesson, and he nodded after checking a list. The gates opened. She stepped into a world she had only ever seen from far away. The garden was enormous, with trimmed trees, clean paths, and a fountain that sparkled in the sunlight. She walked slowly, trying not to look too amazed even though she was at the door. A woman welcomed her with a polite nod. She introduced herself as one of the senior staff members and guided her inside. The house was large, but strangely quiet. It didn't feel like a home. It felt more like a place where people rarely laughed or relaxed as they walked through the halls. She saw the walls decorated with awards, framed photos of company buildings, and newspaper articles praising the CEO. She didn't see any family pictures. The silence made her feel nervous. Finally, the staff member stopped at a wide room with a grand piano in the center. Near the piano sat a young boy, around 10 years old. He sat still, hands neatly placed on his lap, head slightly tilted as if listening to sounds others couldn't hear. The staff member whispered, "He doesn't talk much. Just be gentle." The young woman nodded. She stepped forward slowly, not wanting to startle him. When she reached him, she spoke softly. "Hi, my name is. I'm here to play piano with you, if that's okay." The boy turned his face toward her voice. His eyes didn't focus, but his expression softened, as if he could sense her warmth. He didn't say anything, but he didn't pull away either. She sat beside him. The piano felt huge, polished, and expensive, nothing like the small, dusty one she used to play when she was little. She gently placed her fingers on the keys and played a simple melody she remembered. It wasn't perfect, but it was soft and warm. The boy listened. Then she gently lifted his hand and placed his fingers on the keys. "This one," she said. "Try pressing it." He pressed the key. A small sound filled the room. The boy's lips lifted slightly, a shy smile forming. She smiled back, even though he couldn't see it. "Good job." For the next half hour, they played slowly. She didn't rush him. She let him feel the keys, repeat notes, and enjoy every sound he made. By the end of the session, his shoulders had relaxed. He even leaned closer to the piano as if he wanted to stay longer. The staff member, watching from the corner, looked surprised. "He never sits this long," she whispered. The young woman felt a small spark of hope. When the lesson ended, she stood up slowly. The boy reached out and touched the edge of her sleeve, holding it gently, as if asking her not to leave. Her heart tightened. "I'll come again if they allow me," she said softly. She stepped out of the room, and the staff member walked with her back to the entrance. Before she reached the door, someone spoke behind her. "You did well." She turned. A tall man stood near the hallway. His expression was unreadable, his posture straight and serious. She didn't need anyone to tell her who he was. As CEO, she had seen his picture in news articles. He looked exactly as people described: cold, distant, and intimidating. She immediately lowered her eyes, unsure if she should say something. "I'll let the assistant contact you," he said in a calm but firm voice. "You may go." She nodded quickly and left through the front door, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her ears. As she stepped out of the mansion and onto the quiet road, she let out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. She had no idea if she would get the job. She didn't know what the CEO thought of her. She didn't know if she played well enough, but she knew one thing: the boy smiled. And that meant something. She walked home with tired legs but a hopeful heart, unaware that her life had just taken a turn she never expected. She didn't know she would become someone important in that quiet boy's world. She didn't know someone else had been quietly observing her every move. And she didn't know how much her presence would change the atmosphere inside that large, silent mansion. All she knew was that, for the first time in a long while, she felt like something good might happen. The next morning, the young woman woke up before the sky had fully brightened. Her alarm had not even rung yet, but her eyes opened on their own. She lay still for a moment, listening to the soft breathing of her mother asleep nearby. For the first time in months, she felt something different inside her, something that almost felt like hope. She sat up slowly and rubbed her eyes. Her mind went straight to the trial lesson from the previous day. She could still see the boy's faint smile in her mind, a small expression, but filled with meaning. She remembered the sound of his fingers pressing the piano keys, the quiet interest he showed in each note, and the stillness that wasn't cold but cautious, gentle. But above all, she remembered the CEO standing in the hallway, his eyes sharp, unreadable, his presence heavy, as if the air shifted when he appeared. She remembered how he had watched her without showing any emotion. She wasn't sure if he approved or disapproved. Maybe he only spoke those words out of politeness. Maybe he had already forgotten her. She didn't know, but she hoped for a chance to return. She hoped for a call. She stood up to start her morning routine, moving quietly so she wouldn't disturb her mother. She made tea with the last bit of leaves they had, warmed a piece of bread, and placed it beside her mother's bed. Then she washed her face and tied her hair neatly. Every few minutes she checked her phone, half believing that maybe the assistant had already messaged, but there was nothing. She sighed softly and sat on the edge of the bed, thinking through her options for the day. She had a shift at a small store later, but the morning remained open. She wondered if she should look for other jobs or wait. As she picked up her bag, her phone buzzed. Her heart jumped. She grabbed it quickly. A message from an unknown number lit up the screen. Please come for the next piano session at 10 a.m. Confirm if available. Her breath caught in her throat. She stared at the message for several seconds, unable to believe it. They wanted her back. They wanted her to teach the boy again. She typed her confirmation with shaky fingers. She didn't have time to celebrate, because the clock was already ticking. She rushed to get ready, changing into the same clothes she had worn the previous day, but smoothing them out carefully. She checked her hair again and again, even though she usually didn't care much about her appearance. Something about entering that silent, grand mansion made her want to appear respectful. Before leaving, she whispered to her mother, "I got called again. I'm going to teach the boy today." Her mother stirred and opened her tired eyes. A soft smile appeared. "That's wonderful, dear. Do your best. Good things come slowly, but they come." Her words warmed the young woman's heart. She hurried out the door and made her way to the mansion. The closer she got, the more nervous she felt. She tried to calm her breathing and remind herself that the important thing wasn't the CEO or the huge house, it was the boy. When she reached the gate, the security guard recognized her and opened the gate without hesitation. She walked down the long path again, feeling a little more familiar with the surroundings, but still overwhelmed by the mansion's size. The same staff member from yesterday greeted her at the door. This time, the woman gave her a small nod that almost felt warm, as if she found comfort in seeing someone who could reach the boy. "He's in the piano room," the staff member said softly. "He's been waiting since morning." "Waiting?" the young woman asked, surprised. "Yes, He rarely waits for anyone. He usually prefers being alone. But today he sat near the piano and asked what time you were coming. The young woman's heart softened. She wasn't sure how to respond, but her steps grew lighter as she approached the room. When she entered, she saw the boy sitting in the same place as yesterday, but this time he lifted his head quickly when he heard the door open. His face pointed directly toward her, recognizing her footsteps or maybe her presence. "Good morning," she said softly. He didn't speak, but he gave a small nod. The same gentle expression as before. She sat beside him at the piano. She didn't rush to play anything. Instead, she placed his hand gently on the keys again. "We'll go slowly, okay? You can take your time." He nodded again. She played a few soft notes to remind him of the melody they had practiced. Then she guided his fingers to follow, lightly pressing his knuckles to help him feel the motion. He listened closely, not just with his ears, but with the quiet sensitivity of someone who lived through sound. She admired that about him. He felt music. Differently, more deeply. They practiced a very simple pattern, repeating it again and again. Each time he improved just a little. Each time his smile appeared a little quicker. She noticed something else too. Occasionally, he would tilt his head slightly, as if listening for something beyond the room. She didn't understand it at first, until she remembered the tall shadow she had seen in the hallway the day before. Was someone watching again? She glanced at the doorway once, but didn't see anyone. The hallway looked empty. Still, she felt a faint sensation, like someone's attention lingering just out of sight. She pushed the thought aside and focused on the boy. During a break, she let him touch the different parts of the piano, the keys, the smooth lid, the curved edges. He explored it with curious hands, tracing its shape and smiling at its texture. "You're doing really well," she said warmly. He touched her wrist, a gentle gesture of acknowledgement. She realized he used touch to express emotions he couldn't easily show with words. They continued for another hour. By the end, he could play a short sequence on his own. It wasn't perfect, but it was beautiful because it was his effort. The boy looked tired but peaceful. She closed the piano slowly, not wanting to startle him. "Would you like to continue again tomorrow?" she asked softly. He nodded instantly. Almost eagerly, she felt a warm feeling in her chest as they stood to leave. The door opened slightly. The staff member entered with a gentle smile. "The CEO would like to speak with you." For a moment, her heart froze. She swallowed hard and followed the staff member out of the room. They walked down a quiet hallway toward an office with tall wooden doors. The staff member knocked gently. "Come in," a deep voice said from inside. The young woman stepped in cautiously. The CEO sat behind a large desk, his expression serious but calm. His eyes lifted to meet hers, and she felt the weight of his gaze instantly. He didn't speak for a moment. He simply observed her, the way someone might examine a puzzle piece. They weren't sure fit. "Sit," he finally said. She sat on the chair across from him, her back straight, her hands folded together nervously. He tapped his fingers lightly on the desk. "I watched part of the lesson." Her breath caught. So he had been watching. "You are patient," he continued. "He responds to you more than he has responded to anyone in a long time." She didn't know what to say. She simply nodded. "There is something you should understand," he said, his voice firm but not harsh. "My son has had many tutors, many professionals. None of them stayed long. Some left because he didn't speak. Some left because he didn't trust them. And some simply didn't have the patience." She listened carefully. He leaned back. "But he seems comfortable with you. I don't know why. I don't know what he senses. But it is clear." The young woman lowered her eyes slightly, humbled by his words. "So, He continued, "If you are willing, I would like you to continue teaching him regularly. You will be compensated fairly." Relief washed over her so strongly she almost lost her breath. She nodded quickly. "Yes, I would like to continue." The CEO studied her face for a moment longer, as if trying to understand her intentions. Then he gave a brief nod. "You may leave," he said simply. She stood up, bowed slightly out of respect, and walked out of the office. Once she was back in the hallway, she let out a deep breath. The staff member approached her. "You did well," she said with a small smile. The young woman smiled back shyly. Before leaving the mansion, she peeked into the piano room. The boy was sitting quietly, his hand resting on the keys as if waiting for the next note. She whispered, "I'll be back tomorrow." He didn't speak, but he lifted his head toward her voice, and that was enough. When she stepped outside, the sun felt warmer than usual. She walked home with a lighter heart, feeling as if something in her life had shifted. Something small, but meaningful. She didn't know what the coming days would bring. She didn't know how much the quiet boy would grow attached to her presence. And she didn't know that the CEO, who seemed so distant and cold, would continue, watching more closely than she realized. All she knew was that she had finally found something she was good at, something that felt right, something that mattered, and for her, that was more than enough for now. From the very next day, the young woman began visiting the mansion regularly. Each morning she walked through the tall gates with a mix of nerves and quiet excitement. The staff started greeting her with warm nods instead of the cautious looks they gave on her first visit. Even the security guard, who rarely changed his expression, offered a small smile whenever she arrived. And every day, without fail, the boy sat near the piano waiting for her. He didn't sit stiffly like he used. T.O. Now he leaned forward a little, his fingers resting lightly on the edge of the piano, as if he wanted to begin the lesson even before she entered. The moment he heard her steps, his face lifted toward her. And though his eyes could not see her, something in his expression made it clear he recognized her presence instantly. She always greeted him gently, never raising her voice, always making sure he felt safe. "Good morning," she would say softly. He never replied with words, but his small smile was enough. They began each lesson slowly. She never pushed him. She let him feel the keys again, guiding his fingers until he grew more confident. Sometimes he would press a note a little too softly, sometimes a little too firmly, but she encouraged every attempt. With every passing day, his progress became more noticeable. He could remember melodies longer. He could repeat rhythms after hearing them. Only once. And sometimes, when she paused playing, he continued the tune on his own, surprising even himself. The staff often whispered among themselves. They had never seen him open up like this, not even with expensive tutors. It had only been a few days, but the change was clear. The young woman saw it too. Each improvement made her smile. She wanted him to grow, not just in music, but in confidence. She could sense how lonely he had been before. He didn't speak, but his silence was not empty. It was full of emotions. He didn't know how to express that sometimes. She wondered what his world felt like. A world of sounds, touches, and thoughts he kept locked inside. One day, after a particularly good practice session, she decided to try something new. She took his hand and placed it gently on her chest. "Do you feel this?" she asked softly. His hand rested there, still and curious. "My heartbeat," she continued. "This means I'm proud of you. It means I'm happy." He touched her shirt lightly, then drew his hand back slowly, almost shyly. But his smile grew a little wider that day. Their quiet bond deepened. What she didn't know was that someone else had begun watching even more closely. The CEO had always been a reserved man. He rarely spoke unless necessary, and even then his words were short and direct. His staff respected him, but they also feared him. He had built his company with strict discipline, high expectations, and an unwavering focus. He didn't let emotions guide him. Or at least, that's what everyone believed. But something changed the day he saw the young woman teaching his son. He started visiting the hallway, near the piano room, almost every day. He never entered the room. He never announced his presence. He simply stood near the doorway, just out of sight, where he could hear everything. He listened to the soft notes of the piano drifting through the hall. He listened to the gentle encouragement in the young woman's voice. And most of all, he listened to the small sounds his son made, tiny laughs, breaths of excitement, quiet hums whenever he enjoyed a melody. Those sounds were rare, precious. They reminded the CEO of things he thought he had lost forever. He told himself he stood there only to check on his son's progress. But a part of him knew the truth was deeper. Something about the young woman's presence soothed the part of him he didn't show the world. He watched her kindness. He watched her patience. He watched the way she never rushed his son, never scolded him, never made him feel small. He noticed everything, even the smallest gestures. Sometimes when the lesson ended, the boy reached for her hand, holding it gently as if anchoring himself to something safe. The CEO saw this and felt something twist inside him, not jealousy, not sadness, but something he couldn't name. He had not felt that kind of warmth in years, but he never revealed himself. He preferred to stay in the shadows, observing quietly. Young woman, unaware of his presence, continued teaching with sincerity. One afternoon, the boy seemed a little tired. She paused their lesson and asked softly, "Do you want to rest?" He shook his head quickly, pressing his fingers back onto the keys. She smiled, realizing how much he wanted to learn. She decided to teach him a simple tune she used to play long ago, a melody her father taught her. It was soft and gentle, almost like a lullaby. She pressed the keys slowly, letting each note settle in the air. The boy listened with his whole being, tilting his head slightly to catch every vibration. Then she guided his hands piece by piece. On the other side of the doorway, the CEO listened too. He hadn't heard that melody before, but something about it felt familiar in a distant way. Maybe it was the simplicity. Maybe it was the sincerity. Or maybe it was the way the young woman played, not with perfection, but with heart. Little by little, the boy began to repeat the melody. His small fingers moved carefully, at times uncertain, but his determination softened the air around them. "You're doing great," she whispered. Just like that. The CEO felt an unexpected warmth bloom in his chest. For a moment, the usually cold hallway felt like a different world. After the lesson, when the boy finally rested his hands, she allowed him to explore the piano again. He traced the edges, touched the keys lightly, and touched her sleeve. She took his hand gently. "You're getting better every day." His face relaxed into a peaceful smile. The CEO stepped back quietly before they finished. He didn't want her to see him. He wasn't ready to reveal how much he had been watching. That evening, as she prepared to leave, the staff member walked her to the door. "He likes you," the staff member said softly. She nodded, touched by the words. "He's a good boy. He just needs someone to go slowly with him." The staff member smiled. "It's not only him who notices you." The young woman tilted her head. "What do you mean?" "Oh, nothing," the staff member said quickly, waving her hand lightly. "Just keep doing what you're doing. You're helping more than you know." She didn't think much of it, but as she walked home, the words replayed in her mind. Not only him who notices you. What did that mean? She didn't understand, but she shrugged the thought away and focused on her day. Every moment she spent with the boy felt meaningful. She had grown attached to him, and she didn't hide it. Over the next week, their lessons continued smoothly. She introduced new exercises, new melodies, and even small rhythms using claps and taps. The boy followed her lead, always trying his best. One morning, she arrived earlier than usual. She didn't expect anyone to be around yet, so she walked quietly down the hallway. As she passed by one of the open doors, she heard a low voice. The CEO was inside, speaking to someone on the phone. His tone was firm, but not harsh. "I don't care about the cost. If it benefits my son, approve it." She didn't mean to eavesdrop, so she hurried past the door. But hearing him speak with such determination stirred something inside her. For all his cold appearance, he cared deeply for his son. It was clear in the way he spoke. When she reached the piano room, the boy was already there, turning his head as soon as she entered. "Good morning," she said. He touched the piano keys lightly, as if saying he was ready. She sat beside him and began their lesson. A few minutes later, she heard the faint sound of footsteps in the hallway. They were steady, slow, and familiar. She wondered if the CEO was there again, but she didn't look. She kept her focus on the boy. She wanted to give him her full attention. She played the melody again, letting him repeat after her. His movements grew smoother every day. Sometimes he made mistakes, but he always tried again. At one point, his finger slipped off the key slightly, making a quiet wrong sound. "Oops," she said gently. "It's okay. Try again." He paused. Then he pressed the correct note. From the hallway, the CEO's eyes softened. He wasn't sure when he started admiring her patience, but he knew now that she was different from anyone who had stepped into this house. When the lesson ended, she closed the piano lid gently. She didn't see the tall shadow disappear from the hallway. She didn't hear the quiet exhale of someone who rarely showed emotion. She only felt the boy's small hand reaching for hers again. She squeezed it lightly. "I'll come again tomorrow." He nodded, holding on for a moment longer before letting go. That evening, when she stepped outside the mansion, she felt strangely watched, not in a frightening way, but as if someone had noticed her existence more than before. She didn't know that the CEO stood by the window upstairs, watching her walk down the long path. He didn't know what he felt. He told himself it was only gratitude, only relief that his son finally had someone who understood him. But deep inside, something else had begun, something he couldn't name yet. And she, walking under the fading sunlight, had no idea that her simple kindness was slowly warming a heart that had been cold for years. Part 3 ends here. The days that followed felt different inside the large, quiet house. The young woman never said it out loud, but she could sense a change in the boy. There was more lightness in his voice, a little more certainty in his hands whenever he touched the piano keys. The mansion staff noticed it too. They whispered about how he woke earlier than usual now, and how he waited near the music room long before she arrived each day. None of them had seen him this motivated in years. When she returned for the next set of lessons, she felt the same nervousness that always came before stepping into such a fancy home. But the moment she saw the boy sitting upright near the piano, she felt calmer. He turned his head toward her the second she walked in, as if he recognized her footsteps. A tiny smile formed on his face, something she had not seen often. She greeted him softly and took her usual place beside him. His small fingers rested on top of the piano keys, like he was waiting for permission to begin. She guided his hand gently and asked him to try a simple pattern they had practiced the day before. His movements were a little shaky at first, but he pushed through. The notes came out uneven, then smoother, then full. The boy let out a breath, almost like he had been holding it the whole time. She clapped for him with so much honesty that he laughed without thinking. It was a warm, soft laugh that even surprised him. She could see how proud he felt, even if he didn't know how to express it fully, yet she encouraged him to try again. This time, he straightened his back and played the entire sequence with fewer mistakes. His confidence grew with every little success. Every time he made a mistake, she calmly corrected him, telling him it was normal and that mistakes meant progress. The boy absorbed every word as usual. She had no idea there were quiet footsteps just outside the room. The CEO once again stood near the side of the door, hidden from her view, but able to hear everything. He watched the way she leaned closer when the boy hesitated, the way she patiently guided him with her voice, and how she celebrated even small improvements like they meant the world. The boy had never reacted like this to any of the previous tutors. Most of them were strict or impatient, treating him more like a task than a child. This was the first time someone talked to him gently, encouraged him, and spoke to him as if he mattered. The CEO didn't expect someone from such a simple background to connect with his son this deeply. It puzzled him and softened something inside him that he wasn't used to admitting. The young woman continued the lesson without realizing she was being observed. She asked the boy if he wanted to try using both hands this time. His reaction was hesitant, and he shrank a little at the thought of trying something new. She noticed the tension in his shoulders and immediately softened her tone. She told him it was fine if he didn't get it right, and that she would guide him step by step. Her words eased him. Slowly, he placed his other hand on the keys. She placed her hand over his lightly, guiding him through the motion. It took a long time, many pauses, and several frustrated sighs from the boy, but she never gave up on him. The CEO stood behind the door longer than he meant to. He watched every moment silently, trying to understand why her presence made such a difference. He didn't reveal himself, not wanting to make her nervous or disrupt the boy's progress. The mansion staff saw him standing near the hallway and didn't dare interrupt. They all knew how rare it was for him to take time from his demanding schedule, but something about these lessons kept pulling him back. After many attempts, the boy finally played a small combination using both hands. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress, real progress. He let out another small laugh, this one filled with relief. She smiled warmly and told him she was proud of him, and the boy's face lit up. For a moment, she forgot she was in a giant mansion, teaching a child whose father was one of the most powerful men in the city. In that moment, she was simply someone helping a boy find joy in something new. When the lesson ended, she packed her things slowly while the boy sat beside her. He asked if she would come again tomorrow, and she told him she absolutely would. His shoulders relaxed, and he whispered a quiet thank you. It was the most polite, heartfelt thing he had said since she started working there. She stepped out of the music room and walked toward the exit. She didn't notice that just a second before she opened the door, the CEO had stepped away into another hallway. He always made sure she never caught him watching. Something about being seen observing felt too personal, too revealing. On her way out, the family assistant stopped her to say the boy's mood had been improving a lot recently. The assistant thanked her warmly and said her presence was making a difference. She felt a mix of emotions: gratitude, surprise, and a hint of disbelief. She had come here simply to earn money to support her sick mother. She never expected to impact someone else's life so deeply. Back in the music room, the CEO stepped inside after she left. His son was still sitting near the piano, gently running his fingers along the keys. He asked in a small voice if he had done well today. The CEO answered in a soft tone that shocked even himself. He told his son that he had done better than well. The boy smiled, and the CEO rested a hand on his shoulder for a brief moment. It had been a long time since he had spoken to his son like that. That night, the CEO sat alone in his office at home, replaying the sounds of the lesson in his mind. He had been so consumed by work and pressure that he never realized how much his son needed gentle encouragement. He wondered how someone who had so little could give so much warmth. The next morning, the young woman woke early and prepared for another visit. She didn't own many nice clothes, so she wore the same simple outfit she always did. She walked to the mansion with the same humble determination. All she knew was that she needed this job to survive, but she also felt a growing fondness for the boy she taught. When she arrived, the boy was already waiting. He looked excited, almost restless, like he had been counting the minutes. His excitement made her smile. She couldn't help but feel touched by how much he trusted her. During that day's lesson, the boy played more confidently than ever. His fingers moved with a rhythm he didn't have before. She encouraged him whenever he slowed down, and he listened carefully. Every time he got a piece right, he cheered quietly, and she clapped for him. Meanwhile, the CEO listened again from the hallway. He realized this routine of quietly observing had become almost a habit. He knew it wasn't entirely fair to her watching without her knowing, but something about seeing his son flourish made him keep returning. The boy's confidence continued to grow over the next few weeks. He started recognizing her voice instantly. He asked her questions, told her small stories, and even shared how he wished he could play like the musicians he heard on recordings. She promised him that one day he would. The mansion staff became gentler toward her now. They offered her tea when she arrived and treated her with more respect. They could see how important she had become in the household. The CEO watched all of this silently, keeping his distance and his thoughts to himself. One afternoon, after a particularly strong lesson, the boy played a short melody almost flawlessly. It was the first time he played something that sounded like a real song. His joy was impossible to hide. He clapped for himself and laughed softly. She felt tears gather in her eyes, but wiped them quickly before he noticed. She told him he was doing great, and that one day people would be amazed by what he could play. He nodded with quiet pride. Outside the room, the CEO had paused for a long time. Something stirred in him, a mix of pride, gratitude, and a feeling he hadn't experienced in years. He didn't fully understand it yet, and he wasn't ready to face it. But one thing was clear. The boy was changing, and the young woman was the reason. The CEO knew this wasn't the end of the changes. Something bigger was coming, something he wasn't prepared for, but something he could no longer ignore. The next few days moved quietly, but something heavy hung in the air without anyone noticing it at first. The young woman continued her visits as usual, teaching the boy with the same kindness and patience she always carried with her, but she sensed something different in the way the mansion felt. The staff seemed more alert, almost like they were expecting something to happen. She brushed it off, thinking maybe they were dealing with some important event she didn't know about. When she entered the music room, the boy was sitting near the piano with his hands resting on his knees. He turned toward the door the moment she stepped in. The smile on his face was brighter than usual. He asked how her morning had been, surprising her, because he usually waited for her to begin conversations. She told him it had been a simple morning, nothing special, and he laughed softly. There was something different in him, too. He sat straighter, he spoke with more confidence, and the uncertainty in his touch on the piano keys had faded little by little. She felt proud watching him. The lesson began with a warm-up pattern. His fingers glided across the keys, hesitating only a few times. She gently corrected him, guiding his hands like she always did. When he managed to play the sequence without a single pause, he beamed with pride. It was clear how much progress he had made. A few minutes into the lesson, she heard quiet footsteps outside the door. They were soft but steady. She thought it might be the family assistant, but the sound didn't fade away. It stayed in place. She felt a brief sense of confusion, but continued the lesson. She didn't know that the CEO had arrived home earlier than usual and was once again listening from behind the door. The boy didn't know either, but his father listened to every note, every word of encouragement, and every laugh that filled the room. The CEO stood motionless as he watched his son interact with the young woman so comfortably. He wasn't used to seeing his child this open. The lesson continued with a new piece she introduced. It was slightly harder, something she wasn't sure. The boy was ready for yet, but she believed in him. She always believed in him. He struggled during the first attempt. His fingers hit the wrong keys, and frustration began to appear in his expression. She placed her hand gently on his shoulder and told him to take a deep breath. He nodded slowly and tried again. This time, the melody came out smoother. Still broken, but smoother. She praised him, telling him he was doing wonderfully. Her voice was calm, steady, comforting. The boy relaxed, and the tension in the room faded. Outside the door, the CEO let out a quiet breath. He didn't even realize he had been holding it. After a while, the lesson reached its halfway point. She asked the boy how he felt about the new piece. He thought for a moment and said he liked it because it sounded hopeful. She smiled at his description. She told him that music often reflects how we feel, even when we don't know how to say it. The boy tilted his head and asked her what hope sounded like to her. She paused for a moment. She didn't want to give some dramatic answer or something. That sounded forced. She just spoke from her heart. She said hope sounded like something that starts quietly but grows stronger with time. The boy nodded thoughtfully, as if he understood. The CEO, still near the doorway, felt something tighten inside his chest as he listened. She moved on and guided the boy through the rest of the lesson. Every now and then, she leaned closer, correcting his finger positions gently. Whenever he made progress, she encouraged him without overwhelming him. She treated him not as someone fragile, but as someone capable. And for the first time in his life, he believed it. As the lesson drew to an end, something unexpected happened. The boy asked her a question he had never asked before. He asked if she enjoyed coming to teach him, or if she only came for the job. The question caught her by surprise. She knew she needed the money desperately, but she couldn't lie not to him. She told him the truth in the simplest way she could. She said she came because she needed the job, but she enjoyed being there because spending time with him made her feel peaceful. The boy smiled softly. He said he felt peaceful when she was there too. At that moment, something shifted again. The CEO felt it as he listened silently, hidden just out of sight. He couldn't explain the feeling, but something in him stirred. Maybe it was relief, maybe gratitude, maybe something deeper he wasn't ready to name. Before she ended the lesson, she taught him a short, sweet melody. It was simple, but full of warmth. She told him to practice it when she wasn't there. The boy nodded and tried it a few times as she packed her things. She told him she would return the next day. He thanked her again, and she walked out of the room. But this time, when she stepped into the hallway, she stopped suddenly. The CEO was standing a few steps away. She froze, unsure of what to do. She had never seen him this close, except the very first day she arrived. Even then, he had barely spoken. Now he was standing directly in front of her. He looked calm, but something in his eyes was different. Softer, less distant, but still unreadable. She lowered her gaze respectfully, unsure if she had done something wrong. The CEO spoke first. His voice was quiet, almost unfamiliar. He asked how the lesson went. She answered politely, saying the boy was improving quickly and working very hard. She spoke with sincerity, not wanting to sound like she was exaggerating. The CEO nodded slowly. Then, for the first time, he thanked her. Not politely, not formally, but genuinely. The words surprised her. She didn't expect him to thank her for anything. He told her he had noticed the changes in his son. He said the boy spoke more, smiled more, and even waited eagerly for piano lessons. The CEO admitted he hadn't seen his son this hopeful in years. She didn't know what to say. She just nodded softly and murmured that she was glad. He was improving. There was a long pause. The CEO studied her for a moment. She felt nervous under his gaze, though he wasn't glaring at her. He just looked like he was thinking about 100 things at once. Finally, he said something she wasn't prepared for. He told her she had done more for his son than any specialist, therapist, or tutor ever had. Her eyes widened slightly, surprised by such strong words. She didn't think she was doing anything special. She was just teaching a little boy how to play piano and giving him the gentle patience he needed. The CEO thanked her again, then stepped aside politely so she could leave. She nodded and walked out of the mansion, still processing everything. He had said Dot as she walked down the long path toward the gate. She felt a strange mix of emotions, gratitude, disbelief, and a quiet warmth spreading in her chest. She had never been praised like that before, especially not by someone like him. She didn't know that after she left, the CEO stood in the hallway for a long time, staring at the place where she had stood. Something in him was changing, and he didn't know how to stop it. Later that night, the boy sat at the piano again, practicing the melody she taught him. His father watched from a distance, not wanting to disturb. The boy played with a soft smile, and for the first time, his music filled the house with a gentle sense of peace. The CEO closed his eyes briefly, letting the moment sink in. He didn't know what the future would bring, but one thing was undeniable. The young woman had brought light into his son's world. And without realizing it, she had brought light into his own as well. She woke up earlier than usual the morning of the meeting. Her small room was still dim, touched only by the first bit of daylight sneaking through the window. For a moment, she stayed still, listening to the quiet around her. Today wasn't like other days. It carried something different, something that made her chest feel both tight and light at the same time. She sat up slowly, rubbing her hands together to warm them. Her mind drifted back to the older gentleman's voice from the phone call. He had spoken gently, reassuringly, as if he wasn't offering a test, but simply a chance to breathe again. Still, she felt nervous, terrified even. What if she played terribly today? What if he realized she wasn't as good as he thought? The doubts came naturally. She had lived with them for years. She washed her face, tied her hair, and dressed in her cleanest outfit. Not fancy, just simple and neat. She didn't have anything else anyway. She stood in front of the small mirror near her door, adjusting her collar. She wasn't used to looking at herself for long, but today she wanted to make sure she didn't look like she was falling apart. After a small breakfast, she left her apartment, holding her bag tightly. The morning breeze brushed her cheeks and made her feel more awake. The city around her was already alive, but she walked as if she were in her own quiet bubble, carefully protecting the soft hope growing inside her. She arrived at the address written on the note, a modest building with wide glass doors. She hesitated for a moment before stepping inside. The lobby was calm, clean, and filled with soft light. She felt out of place, but pushed herself to keep walking. A receptionist smiled at her politely. "Good morning. Do you have an appointment?" She nodded shyly and gave the name of the gentleman. The receptionist checked the schedule and nodded. "Yes, he's expecting you. You can take the elevator to the 3rd floor. He'll meet you there." Her heart thudded. She thanked the receptionist and stepped into the elevator. It felt like the ride took forever, even though it lasted just a few seconds. When the doors opened, the older gentleman was already waiting outside, smiling warmly. "I'm glad you made it," he said. She lowered her gaze respectfully. "Thank you for inviting me, sir. Come with me," he said. "There's someone I want you to meet." He led her down a quiet hallway to a room with a piano. A real piano. Not a keyboard, not an old, broken one. A polished, beautiful instrument with a presence that made her breath catch. Inside stood a woman, perhaps in her 40s, with an air of calm confidence. She looked at the waitress with kind eyes. "This is the person I told you about," the older gentleman said. "She runs one of the music programs here." The woman stepped forward. "I heard part of your performance from the wedding video. You play with emotion, not technique, and that's something that can't be taught." The waitress blinked. "Wedding video?" she echoed. "Yes," the woman said gently. "Someone from the wedding recorded you playing and shared it with the family. That's how I heard it." "And that's why we wanted to see you?" The waitress felt her knees weaken slightly. So many people had seen her performance. The idea terrified her, yet a small part of her felt grateful too. The woman gestured toward the piano. "Whenever you're ready, you can play something. Anything you like. There's no pressure." Her palms grew sweaty. She stared at the piano for a long moment, afraid to embarrass herself. But then she remembered the feeling she had when she played at the wedding. She remembered the calm, the peace, the way the music felt like a place she belonged. She took a slow breath and approached the piano. Her fingers hovered above the keys. They were smooth, cool, perfect. She closed her eyes and began to play. The notes came softly at first, almost hesitant, like she was walking on fragile ground. But as she continued, something changed. Her fingers remembered. Her heart remembered. She wasn't playing to impress anyone, she was playing to speak. The melody grew warmer, fuller. It wasn't a famous song or complicated piece. It was something she made up on the spot, something shaped by her life, her struggles, her quiet hopes. When she finished, the room fell silent. A complete, still silence. She slowly opened her eyes, afraid to look up. The older gentleman was smiling. The woman's eyes were soft, almost emotional. "That," the woman said quietly, "is what real music sounds like." The waitress felt her throat tighten. I'm not trained. I don't know notes properly anymore. I don't have money for classes. I don't." The woman stepped closer, stopping her gently. "Listen to me. You don't need to pay for anything. This program is made for people like you, people who have talent but no opportunities. We can help you grow. Not overnight and not with pressure, but with guidance." Her eyes widened. "You mean you want me to join?" "If you want to," the woman said. "Only if you want to." The waitress looked at the piano again. Her hands trembled slightly. A life spent working, struggling, worrying suddenly, she stood in a place where someone believed in her without asking for anything in return. Tears filled her eyes before she could stop them. She quickly wiped them away, embarrassed. "I want to try," she whispered. The woman smiled warmly. "Then we'll start next week." The older gentleman clapped his hands softly. "I told you," he said with a gentle laugh. "Your gift was never gone. It just needed someone to hear it again." For the first time in so long, the waitress felt something shift inside her, like a heavy door opening, just enough to let the light in. The woman handed her a small folder with simple information about the program. She held it carefully, as if it were something fragile and precious. After the meeting, the older gentleman walked her out of the building. "You did well today," he said kindly. "I know it wasn't easy for you." She nodded, still overwhelmed. "Thank you, sir, for everything." He smiled. "You don't owe me thanks. Just promise me one thing." She looked up. What is it? Don't stop believing in yourself again. Not after this. She felt her eyes warm, but she nodded firmly. I won't. He walked her to the entrance, and she stepped outside into the bright afternoon light dot as she walked down the street. Holding the folder against her chest, she could feel her heart beating with a rhythm she hadn't felt in a long time. Not fear, not stress, hope. That quiet, steady hope. She knew life wouldn't magically become easy. She would still work her shifts, still deal with the challenges of daily life. But now, she also had something new, something that belonged only to her. A chance, a path, a beginning. That evening, when she returned to her small apartment, she didn't feel the usual weight pressing on her. Instead, she felt excited to practice. She walked straight to her old keyboard and plugged it in. She sat down, took a deep breath, and let her fingers gently rest on the worn keys. And for the first time, she didn't play to escape her life. She played for her future, a future she never thought she would have. Future now growing from the simple moment she sat at a wedding piano and let her heart speak. And this time, she wasn't going to let that part of her disappear ever again.